Part 2.
What? Oh no! Oh no, I'm in an alien hive. Whatever shall become to me? I definitely don't like this at all. No, definitely not for me. No, thank you, please. Hello again, and welcome back once again for the, I don't know, let's just say 30th time, I guess, to the very first episode of Princess Mally's Dumb Internet Show. I'm Miguel Mal, and this is the show, and while we're waiting on our little burster buddy to burst, I might as well talk about the Xenomorph Lifecycle. Now, the new movie, Romulus, introduced some new concepts that closed some loops and then opened up new possibilities. What's cool, though, is that rather than it being a thing like the last two movies, where they were written badly on purpose and asked questions just to try and trick you into being interested when they never had any clear answers in mind to begin with, Romulus actually works as a complete film on its own. Everything set up in that film is paid off, and every payoff is set up. For that movie, as its own entity, there are no loose ends, which is extremely refreshing because it's been 17 years since an alien movie has actually done that. So rather than the open, oh my god, am I really using this take? Rather, the open ends of Romulus are on the outside. On the open ends, where the movie connects with the rest of the series and the franchise. There are possibilities for the future and then implications of the past that are really interesting, and so rather than the state I was in last time when I asked questions about the Xenomorph Lifecycle, I'm actually happy to ask these questions, because rather than just trying to understand the most basic concepts that the film is trying to communicate, we already have all of that nailed down. It's just the bonus stuff we get to have fun talking about. Oh, by the way, as much as I like that neat little WebKey intro that I put together, I'm not really feeling that formatting stuff right now. I'm kind of playing around with it, and I'm in a transitionary phase with what I'm doing with these videos. I do want this to be a shorter one, like the last Alien video, but I guess with all of the part 2s I got on the back burner right now, I just felt like it was kind of a weird decision on my part to make a meta-series out of things like that, so whatever, I don't know. This is just a video about aliens again. Now, it's not strictly necessary for you to have seen the previous video that I did on aliens this time. The part 3 I have planned will probably benefit from being familiar with what we knew about the Black Goo up until Romulus. The only thing I really want to repeat from last time is the terminology I'll be using, at least the stuff that will be relevant here. Although the title of these videos says Xenomorph in it, I am covering all of the aliens of the series, and if you couldn't hear the capital A in there, I can assure you it was present. Of these, Xenomorph really only technically refers to the type of aliens that we see in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 6th, and 9th movies. Resurrection has the alien-human hybrids, and then Prometheus and Covenant have these other weird species of aliens that have been called proto-aliens, but are actually either more of a lateral move or are the descendants of the Xenomorph. These all have their own names, but to be clear, instead of saying aliens, I want to stick with calling the related primary alien monsters of the series Xenos in the main body of these videos. Another thing I'd like to specify is that the Xenomorphs aren't a monolith either. There's several variations of Xenomorph in the series and a kind of exhausting amount in the larger franchise. Sticking to the films, though, we've got 3. The ones from the first 3 movies that came from the Space Jockey Derelict on LV-426, the ones specially bred by predators for use in their blooding pyramids in the 5th and 6th films, and then the new species introduced in Romulus. Now, last video I played it pretty fast and loose with what I call the species, since these things aren't really Earthlings and they don't work that way. Plus, they're monsters on top of that, and also species is a pretty fuzzy concept to begin with. But for our purposes, I just want to be clear when talking about these things. So when I'm talking about all Xenomorphs, that will be the genus, and the specific variations will be the species. Good? Good. Okay. So, Romulus left us with 4 big questions. 1, what's the deal with the Cocoon Stage? 2, what's the deal with the new species of Xenomorph? 3, what does Romulus mean for the black goo? And then 4, what changes now that we know the engineers are born from humans and not the other way around? This carves neatly in half, with 2 of these pertaining to the Xenomorph, and then the 2 dealing with the new elements introduced in the last 2 films. Since this latter stuff is a lot more complicated, I want to save that for last, and I also still want to make this a shorter video so I can actually get it out at a time when people might actually be interested in alien videos. Although honestly, I think that time window might have passed by now. That is me bearing the lead a bit, sure, but you know, other people are out there making alien videos, so you know, it's not up to me alone to postulate about this. I mean, you're also in the audience for these movies if you're watching this, so I'm sure you have your own ideas without needing me or other YouTube videos to tell you what to think. But I do want to get into that, and I know if I cover both, we'll be here for at least an hour, and I don't want to do that. So we'll tackle the easy stuff first, and then save the hard stuff for part 3. So the first thing is that Cocoon Stage the chestburster went into before emerging as a full-grown adult. The question being, is this a standard part of the life cycle for all species of Xenomorph, or is this unique to this specific one? And this one is actually pretty easy to answer. No, this is not standard for all Xenomorph species. If we took just the first film, that does leave some gray area for where Big Chap could have formed a cocoon at first glance, but the dog alien from Alien 3 definitively does not do this. To explain why Alien 3 is a nail in the coffin for this being something that the XX141 species does, let's look at the context in which the Renaissance Xenomorphs do it. We are told in the first film by Ash, after examining the injuries on the facehugger, that they grow a thicker layer of a silicon-based tissue. This bears out when the pale chestburster, a little bit of West Wing in me, the pale chestburster molts, and then when we see it next, it's covered in a hard, dark material called the mesoskeleton. Now, the obvious implication of a cocoon for us Earthlings is metamorphosis. Things that enter cocoon stages during their life cycle will go into one as a larva, and then they will emerge as an imago. But these aren't Earthlings, these are aliens. And while on the surface it does seem like the bursters are a larva, that's not technically true. We've seen bursters with fully grown limbs before, matured to the point where they look like smaller, pale adults than bursters. That's not a larva, that's a nymph. So, bursters are actually a little bit of both. They emerge sometimes in a fully larval form, sometimes not, and then molt at least twice before fully growing into the dark, armored mesoskeleton. That molting takes us into a growth phase of the burster where it's a nymph, which of course do not go through metamorphosis to become adults. So the cocoon in the context of the Renaissance Xenomorphs isn't for metamorphosis. Remember, just before they find the cocoon, the shedded skin is right next to it. Scorch isn't still cooking or changing in there, they're just getting bigger, and that's it. So the cocoon is really just purely for defensive purposes, which it fails at pretty miserably. But then the nail in the coffin then is the dog alien, or the dragon, according to Gallic. For comparison's sake, let's look at each of the 3 nearly identical sequences in Alien, Alien 3, and Romulus. Number 1. All 3 characters, Brett, Murphy, and Bjorn, discovered the molted pale skin of the initial burst. 2. Each character then in turn immediately discovers the adult or near-adult aliens, Big Chap, the dragon, and Scorch in the same room. 3. They all get got. In the first film, Big Chap is full-grown, so it's not unreasonable to think that he had just emerged from a cocoon not too long ago. But the dragon isn't done growing yet, and it's not in a cocoon. It's curled up in a small hole, still currently in the process of peeling off its old skin as it rapidly grows the darker mesoskeleton. During production, the prop used for this sequence was called the teenage alien, and it's pale, but otherwise more or less identical to the adult, so really, this is what Scorch would have looked like while it was in the cocoon, because it's already molted before constructing it. What we see in Alien 3 is the dog alien at the exact same point in its life sans the cocoon. So, no, the XX121 species doesn't have them. And before I move on, I should point out that the dragon and Scorch aren't exactly at the same point per se, because, like, Scorch is already done cooking when Bjorn finds them, so... But my point still stands that the cocoon takes the place of the dragon's teenage phase, but to really hammer my point home, at the point where Bjorn starts harassing the thing, it's already at the stage Big Chap is. It's fully grown, it's just hiding. Again, it's really just a defensive structure, it's not really for metamorphosis. As for the pyramid xenomorphs, that's not so simple. My gut reaction was just to rule out a Cocoon Stage because they grow up so fast, but like... So here's the deal. Romulus is the 9th Alien movie. In those 9 films, we met 3 species of xenomorph, a hybrid xenomorph human species, 3 different kinds of other black goo xenos, which also have an endoparasitic life cycle, and the new offspring xeno. So that's 8 total kinds of xeno that incorporate gestating inside hosts. Of these, the XX121 species of xenomorph is the only, and I mean only one, that takes longer than an hour to reach full size. I understand that back in the late 90s, or the early aughts, where Xenos from the 4th, 5th, and 6th films seemed like anomalies, but that boat has officially sailed, and it's time to wise up and realize that going from gestation to adult in under an hour is the standard which all other Xenos must be judged, and the XX121 species are the only anomalous ones. They aren't normal. They take a freakishly long time to grow. But more than that, if we want to say that there's no time for the pyramid xenomorphs to go through a cocoon stage, we need to be able to prove that they grow significantly faster, and we just can't do that. We have a ticking clock in Romulus too, though unfortunately it's brand new and still in theaters, so it's not really something I can just go see as many times as I want. That costs money that I don't have, so I can only work with what I remember, and what I remember is that when the chest burster comes out of that one lady, it sends the teenager shuttle into crazy mode, and then it bonks into a space station, and then that alters the trajectory, and soon after this we're told that the Renaissance will break up in the planet's rings, and what I'm pretty sure was 47 minutes. The implantation occurred a little bit before that, but it wasn't that long, and all of the action happened on screen in real time, and basically the entire movie happens in those remaining 47 minutes, meaning Scorch formed that cocoon and grew to full size almost immediately. By comparison, the pyramid from the 5th movie reconfigures every 10 minutes after it's activated when the plasma casters are grabbed, which also releases the ovomorphs. So we can track how long it takes them to go from gestation to full size by the number of configurations that pass. So the chest bursters are out just before 10 minutes, and then we see our first Xeno kill just before 20. This matches up with the chest burster in Romulus. As soon as that bald teenager wakes up, Annie suggests putting her down, and they make a break for it, and then she immediately bursts. So we also don't have a whole lot of time to spare in that 47 minutes for the whole rest of the movie to happen, because a whole hell of a lot of stuff goes down after Scorch emerges from the cocoon. But without them being able to go over it with a without me being able to go over it with a fine-tooth comb, it's too close to call. Honestly, 20 minutes sounds about right to me, and I feel like the margin of error isn't big enough to justify using the minuscule speed differences as evidence to throw out a cocoon stage for the pyramid xenomorphs. We definitely don't see any cocoons in the pyramid, but like that's easily hand-waved. Either the camera just wasn't showing them, or maybe they look completely different from the ones in the Renaissance xenomorphs make, or maybe they're indistinguishable from the hive resin. I just don't think that's good enough, honestly, and it's too close to call. In fact, it might be that of the 3, The reason the XX121 species is the only one that conclusively doesn't have a cocoon stage is because it develops so slowly. Maybe there's more wiggle room for a true metamorphosis than the films let on. It's just tough to say. So, the xenomorphs on board the Renaissance were created in a way that, refreshingly, is actually explained in the film. Now, when I saw it, I missed some of the details of it, but other people didn't, and interviews with the director have cleared up any ambiguity in the process. So, we know for certain what went down. They took Big Chap, sucked the black goo out of him, and then inside that black goo they found some form of genetic material. They took that data, sequenced it, and then fed it into a computer that read it as instructions, and effectively 3D printed the genome exactly as it was written. So in essence, they're just straight up clones. But they look different, and have the standard life cycle rather than the dramatically slower life cycle of the XX121 species. So if they're a clone, why? Now there's two possible answers to this question. One of which is pretty clear to me is the truth. One of which is big if true, and also supports my personal hypothesis regarding xenomorph speciation. So the two possibilities are thus. One, that because it came right from the tap, so to speak, and because we know that when gestating, this species of black goo creates end results that are highly mutable based on the host, what we're getting from the genes inside that black goo in Big Chap is the OG, pure, unfiltered base code of the xenomorphs. As in, the clones are the xenomorphs, the original species from which all others are mutations of. Or two, that because Big Chap spawned from a human host, the black goo inside of them is a specific subspecies of goo which creates essentially human facehuggers, in the same way that Big Chap is a human alien or the dragon is a dog alien. Now both of these are possible based on what's presented in the film, but it seems pretty obvious to me that the first one is what's being implied by the film itself. Now, yes, the existence of Z01 does officially confirm that multiple forms of the black goo can and do exist. So that's the end of that argument as far as that possibility goes. We have opened that Pandora's box, and you bet your ass it's never getting closed. But the bigger question hanging over the franchise since Prometheus is which came first, the xenomorph or the black goo? This is something that it seems like the writers of the licensed materials have taken great pains to keep completely open and ambiguous. The 7th and 8th films, meanwhile, have nothing to really say on the matter because the writers of those films were making it up as they went along and had no fucking clue what they were doing. But what does Romulus think? It doesn't confirm in an undeniable way that blocks all possible rebuttals, but the movie sure as hell hits us on the head hard enough with the fact that it 100% believes that the black goo comes from the xenomorph. They call it the Prometheus strain, and they even play the theme from Prometheus over the dialogue, and it's just really super painfully obvious what they're doing here. The language of film and all that. I could debate that, but let's accept the authorial intent at face value here and consider what that means for a second. The black goo turns whatever it touches into xenos. Secondary modification is possible. If the various goos of the xenomorph are modified for different purposes, such as the hive resin or the royal jelly, then they are essentially a tissue that all different life cycle stages make use of in specific contexts. In its raw form, which is what the movie is telling us the company scientists obtained, it is basically the DNA of the xenomorphs. And I don't mean that in a generic way, I mean it is exactly analogous to the physical helical DNA structures inside the cells of Earthlings. We have DNA, they have black goo. That's what we're being told. Inside these physical coding tissues would definitely be the subroutines for things like royal jelly and whatever else, but the goo itself is the whole package. It's the core program, right? The black goo is mu. It's all in there, basically. So, whether or not the Renaissance of xenomorphs are the original species or mutants incorporating human DNA is based on this question. would the movie hit us over the head that hard in trying to establish that the goo they pulled from Big Chap is the stuff from Prometheus if the genetic codes inside of it produced variant mutant facehuggers polluted from Big Chap's host DNA? Like, obviously not, right? But again, the movie isn't necessarily infallible or right here. After all, just look at how hard Romulus retconned all that creationism shit from the last two movies. So this doesn't really rule out the possibility that the facehuggers are human facehuggers, but what I'm saying is that in order to take the position, you have to assume that the black goo, in order to take that position, rather, you have to assume that the black goo they extracted did not contain the full pure genome of the xenomorphs, and therefore it is a mutated strain of the black goo. So that's really the deciding factor here. Do you believe the movie or not? Personally, I could go either way. The anomalous property of the extremely prolonged life cycle of the XX121 xenomorphs is singular, at least in the films. And that seems important, because all the other species came about in wildly different ways. So, exactly how you speciate such a bizarre and unique feature like that, it would honestly make more sense if XX121 was the original form, which would mean that the Renaissance xenomorphs xenoforms are cloned from the black goo, which isn't pure, which isn't what the film wants you to think. On the other hand, as it is understood now to be anomalous, that also feels like it could be the result of a mutation, right? How? I have no clue, but whichever way you go with it, there's still a question mark waiting for you, so neither of these answers are ironclad or are going to solve every loose end. Now, I mentioned that the idea of them being essentially human facehuggers would be big if true, but even then, I would still be right, because that would just prove a hypothesis that I have about xenomorph speciation. That's actually something I went to save for later, because in order to really get into all of that stuff and how it might work, we're going to have to circle back around to some of the questions left by Alien 3 that I brought up in the first part of what I've decided now is a series. I said I had a pretty solid answer for all of that stuff, and I do, and I was going to save it for one of my standard big giant hour-long video essay type things, but I guess I don't really feel like doing that anymore. I kind of get more out of this, just bringing up stuff and trying to figure it out. And also, let's be real, you don't need me to tell you that xenomorphs reproduce by face-hugging hosts. Like, you already know that, right? That's boring. But that's not going to be the next part. I want to get through the big questions about the black goo and the engineers posed by Romulus next, because Romulus is new, and so that's my priority. But then in part 4, I'll circle back around to the xenomorphs and take a look at how they speciate, how many kinds of eggs there are, and what the hell happened with the situation on the Sulaco. And wow, look at that! I got it in under 5,000 words. How cool is that? I'm really hoping I can streamline video production, because I write shit like this all the time, and I have so many things I want to make, but really I'm a writer more than anything else, and after I get a script done, I have to go and do the editing part, and it's just such a slog, and it takes so long, and I just don't want to do it. That's where I am with the Godzilla Continuity Part 2 video, right? In the middle of editing. I tried to finish that earlier last month now. I'm recording this in early September. I just couldn't get it done in time, and then Romulus came out, and then so I started writing this, and so, that's what's going on. So, that's it for me, and, oh no! What's happening? Blah! 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 Oh my gosh, it's me! I'm the Melly Burster. I was hiding in here the whole time. Don't skip to secret segment. Don't ask me why there's no secret segment on this video. I don't want to talk about it. Also, have a happy life. And I don't have a sign off for secret segment. And robots are cars. Oh no!